Hey, welcome to Intercom Product. I'm Paul Adams. I run the product team at Intercom, and today I'm joined by Traynor, as always, our co-founder and chief strategy officer.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about 2025, what's next, specifically with AI, how it's going to change software, technology, society. We'll see what comes up.
Small topics.
Yeah, small things.
Yeah, okay. Let's get into it.
It's 2 years nearly to the day since ChatGPT emerged. Changed the world, changed how we think about building technology for sure. What are your kind of reflections on the last 2 years, especially with regards to next year? Like, where do you think we are on the kind of S-curve? You know, internally at Intercom, we're talking a lot these days about S-curves and the idea that we're on a new technology cycle. We're still at the very start of something very big. How big? How far along are we? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I struggle. I mean, maybe I'll give my perspective of the time since November 30th, and then we can talk about where it might go, because it's hard to predict exactly where in the S-curve we are. But I think like when it first dropped, like we were probably one of the first people out the door with AI features natively built into Intercom. We had like inbox features, summarization, content generation, etc. Rewrite this content to make it more friendly, that type of stuff. I think that was kind of the sort of first sprinklings of AI that people saw, and after us came like things like Notion had AI. They released their version. And I think so that the first wave of like B2B AI adoption was really just these like I call it like small task augmentation. It's like Johnny had to summarize a ticket and we can do a bit of that for him or whatever, and then in the consumer side, we saw a lot of like basically like thin wrappers, like whether it was like, oh, we'll generate an image for you, or we'll help you write a thing or whatever. And a lot of those products kind of went semi-viral just because like every other day on Product Hunter on Twitter, there'd be some new, oh, you can now use AI to do your homework or to summarize a college lecture or whatever. And a lot of them were just basically like thin wrappers around ChatGPT. So I think that's really like, 2023 was punctuated by like, I would call it B2B sprinklings. You see all these like this fucking this sparkly emoji, like, in your product. On the B2B side, that's what it was. It was like partial task augmentation, stepping up towards, full task augmentation, which is where we were with Finn, say like maybe towards the end of the year. Like we launched Finn to everyone in July. Finn is our agent that actually does customer support. Like it does half of your conversations on average. But in general, most of what we saw was like just this task assistance, co-pilots became common as well, right? And then I think with 2024, what we've seen is kind of like people starting to build, I would call like AI native solutions to regular problems, be they business problems or consumer problems. And when I say AI native, I mean like the entire like company and every piece of the software was kind of conceived knowing that AI was here, as opposed to just retrofitting it on a lot. And I think that's where you're starting to see some real interesting reimagination of categories. I often tell the story of, say, a company I invested in, 11x. So this legitimately happened to me in the space of a week. I got 3 different pitches for 3 different products, all in the sales space. The first pitch I got was, we're going to help you write really effective sales emails using AI. And I was like, great, sounds good. I had a look at that. And I was like, okay. And again, with all these things, I was like, is this just a thin wrapper? Is this just task augmentation again? The next one was like, just give us the list of people and we're going to do research on who they are and we're going to write personalized emails. And I was like, oh shit, well, if that product exists and works, then the previous product doesn't make sense anymore, right? So like there's a different shaped solution there. And then on the Friday, the last pitch I got was like, just tell us the type of people you're trying to reach.
Yeah.
And we'll work out who they are. We'll work out where they are. We'll work out what they've been saying, how to engage with them, how to proactively reach out, how to respond, have all the conversations, set them up for a sales demo or whatever. And you're like, well, Jesus, if that thing exists, then the previous thing and the previous thing don't exist. Now, the challenge with all this is like, some things in AI are really hard but doable, and some things are really hard and seem doable but are never going to be quite that effective. Or like, you might have this like mirage type perpetual motion machine where like you keep thinking you're going to get there and you won't fully. That's like when I often say like these tools either help a human do their job, replace the human doing their job, or replace the org in doing the job of the entire org.
Yeah.
And that's like, when we talk about like 2024 and what's been emerging over the last while, that's really what we're seeing is like the rise of these kind of like AI native solutions that are actually tackling the job of either the entire org or at the very least the job of the human. I think that's like so that's where we are heading into 2025. I'm curious, does that resonate with you, or what's your take on it?
It does, yeah. One thing stood out to me there that you mentioned, that we talk about too internally quite a lot lately. You mentioned like an AI native company. So like Intercom's 13 years old.
Yeah.
We're not AI native. We were not born of the AI generation.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think we've done fairly well. Like you said, we're really early, and we've made a big bet the company really on AI being the next big wave.
Yeah.
Very, very early. It was a good bet to make at the time, not as obvious as it was in hindsight, or it is in hindsight. I think that we have done well, and lots of people probably from the outside, listeners to us today, would say like, hey, Intercom's done pretty well on the AI front. And yet, we're like totally changing how we work. We're paranoid, we're not doing it fast enough, big enough.
Yeah.
We're asking questions like, what does a product and engineering org look like if you start with AI? Like you said, assume AI exists.
Yeah.
What does a product look like if you assume AI exists? We can make an AI for customer service product. But we're still like rooted in the product that was there before.
Yes.
Other people are starting from scratch in all categories. And so I think if you start from scratch, you have the opportunity to think bigger earlier. So the idea that like you can have an AI product that is replacing a full job or replacing a full team is, well, not only is it achievable, there's examples of it already, you know?
Absolutely. Well, the point you made there is just like, it is like, I think for folks listening, I mean, like this, at this point, everyone is like done their pivoting. Like the easiest thing to do, like, and the thing everyone is pretty quick with doing is going to your homepage and writing the words AI somewhere in a H1 tag and be like, job done, we're now AI, right? I think it's to actually survive, if you're an incumbent, I guess, in some senses, we would have been being old, being like 13 years. If you want to survive, you have to actually be willing to reach deep into the bells of the company and make every single piece of it an AI native component. And like, that means carving off pieces that no longer make sense. It means giving up on old rituals, old practices, old software development processes, all sorts of stuff. AI kind of changes, like, it probably changes your brand. Like, there's a reason our website looks the way it does. It's like we're sending a very clear message to the market. It means understanding that your buyer is probably changing. Like, the terminal buyer of AI is often the CEO, the CFO. It's not actually like, you know, if you previously sold into the head of product, that might not be who you sell it anymore, because you might be doing their job for them, you know. So your buyer changes, your brand changes, your go-to-market motion changes, your product definitely changes, you know, and like, we could go on, how you build software changes, the types of people you hire will change, how you support your product changes, you know, the metrics that you would boast about how your product performs change. Like Intercom's brand heritage would have always been a great UI, really nice help desk product, etc. Now we're telling people actually what are, you know, some customers resolve up to 87% of their entire support volume.
Yeah.
That's not like a drop shadow and a bit of beautiful typography. It's a hard number. Like, it's much more like, you know, it's much more like we're selling CPUs, you know, like, So like, I think you have to survive the transition, you have to be willing to harm yourself and make all these like horrible changes. And you need to do it like fast and kind of like in a fairly like ruthless manner. Cause I think, you know, the thing I've learned most, I've been both the cause of this and also the recipient of this, is that there's no force stronger in business than inertia.
Yeah.
When you want to make a change, it's like, it is shocking how weird previous processes, cultures, decisions, even if the people who invented them don't even work in the company anymore, they've somehow managed to get their tentacles into everything. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, I was thinking we could maybe like change issue tracker, or I was thinking we could change how we build, or like we used to have these like intermission formats that we design. Like, these things just keep reinventing themselves. Even when you delete them, they have a way of returning, right? So you have to really kind of be like diligent and disciplined about it. And I think like that's for us to go, you know, you are right. I often people would say like, it looks like we jumped on this thing early, but I think the paranoia you described of like, have we gone far enough? Are we not, like, you know, should we not be changing how we work again, etc. I think it's the only way to actually be sure. And it's almost like the only way you've gone far enough is if you've gone too far, and then you can walk back a bit. Yeah. I think it's really, really tempting to sort of decelerate as you come to the finish line. But I think actually you need to blitz through it and be like, oh, we overshot it. All right, let's come back a bit, you know.
Yeah, that's a big one. I often say to people, you don't know what the boundary, you don't know where the boundary is until you cross it.
Yeah, totally.
You have to cross the boundary.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you think you're close to it. It's actually miles away.
Yeah.
There's loads to unpack there. Like you said, we don't think we've gone far enough. You know, our kind of default mode is we haven't changed enough.
Yeah.
We're not going far enough. We're not like shedding ourselves of the habits, defaults.
Yeah.
So like we slip into old ways of thinking all the time.
Absolutely.
It's like you said, you mentioned inertia. It's really, really hard. There's different ways to do these things. There's you can do them like organically or bit by bit. But I remember I've loads of stories. Lately I've been recounting loads of stories from when I was at Google and Facebook.
Yeah.
You've heard these already, but for the benefit of everybody else, we could talk a little bit about them. I think there's good lessons in there. I was at Google and I worked in the mobile team when the iPhone came out.
Right.
And then I worked at Facebook when Google was trying to destroy Facebook, Google Plus. And these were like mobile and social. This is like early in these S curves. It's the same, like mobile was a big technology change, big S curve. And in the early days, I remember, I'll never forget it, like one of those kind of career moments. We were at Facebook, Zuck called an all hands and got up and said, I can't remember exact words, but got up and said, mobile is the future. We are not moving fast enough. In fact, we're moving way too slow, we're behind, and we're going to lose. Our default path is we're going to lose. Mm-hmm. I was sitting there thinking, like, we're winning.
Yeah.
This is like peak Facebook. I was over in Palo Alto, peak Facebook.
Yeah.
Like, we're winning. Yeah. Are we not winning? It's like, we're losing. Because we're not on the mobile. We're not on mobile.
Was there an obvious competitive threat at the time, like with Snapchat around it?
Yeah, I think this was like I can't remember the exact years, but like
was it near the IPO time? Was it like?
It was. It would have been around IPO time.
Yeah.
Like I guess it was the beginnings, like Instagram.
Yeah, Snapchat. I know was a threat around that period specifically.
Yeah, and Snapchat was very different looking to.
It was mobile only.
Yeah, but even within the company, like you know, what do the designers do? They design a desktop first.
Yeah.
You know, all the kind of obvious things to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, Zuck said. We're now a mobile company.
Yeah.
As in, like present tense. We're now a mobile company. Mm-hmm. And if you're an engineer, you need to become a mobile engineer and you're learning Swift, which is like the mobile language at the time. And that was it.
Yeah.
Like mandate.
Wasn't there some extreme thing that he did where he blocked Facebook.com on web browsers so that people could only use their product through their phones or whatever?
Yeah.
Just to force like the actual thing.
That's right. That's right. I forgot that. We were made to use our phones.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because everyone had phones. Actually, everyone in Facebook had a phone, a company phone.
Yeah.
And we never used rarely used the product on it, nearly as much as we should have. But it was a jolt. It was like a wake up, you know?
Yes.
And I'll never forget it. And I remember at the time, a lot of people were like pissed off.
Yeah,
you know?
Like he's lost it.
They were like, I am a Java programmer. I'm a C++ programmer.
I'm a proud web designer.
Yeah, like, you know. And no, you're not. You're a Swift programmer now.
Yeah, totally.
And I think like my memory of it was like the younger generation kind of leaned in and loved it, and the older generation were more hesitant.
Self-preservation, conservatism, etc.
Yeah.
He talked about that period on the Acquired at the Acquired conference. I was listening to it recently. One interesting thing he said was like how one of the reasons they wanted to cling on to the old ways was because like they loved the web because you could just keep, you could ship all the time.
Right.
Whereas with mobile, you have to like deploy a new update to the App Store and like 6 weeks later it gets approved and all that sort of stuff. And he said like it was just an example of inertia, like because so much of their culture was hardwired around a certain way of building. Yeah. That just doesn't make sense when you have to do these monolithic big bang releases every now and then. And like I think we see versions of that type of thing where like there's styles in which we build and there's things that we focused on historically in Intercom that make way less sense in the time of AI. Like for example, like most obvious one we say all the time is like in the olden days when we released a new feature, like let's say, hey, you can add notes to a conversation. We assume that when we've released it and people are using it, that's job done. In AI world, you have to then go like, I wonder, did the note really get added to the conversation? You're like, what? And you're like, yes, this whole thing is probabilistic. So it's not enough that it's live. It's not enough that it's used. You have to do 2 or 3 extra bits of investigation to make sure that you're actually shipping something useful. So it is like, there's like, when he was telling that story, it reminded me of just like, it wouldn't seem like the manner in which a company chooses to deliver software should have a massive should would be attached to a massive ideological perspective about whether or not you'd be mobile first or not. But actually, that's exactly what happens. Like you don't realize the oblique angles that these inertia forces come at you from, but everything will try and drag you back.
Yeah, it will. Another thing, like there's those two, there's ways of working, ways of thinking. Again, another kind of thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is we're at the end of one S curve and the beginning of another.
Yeah.
And when I think back to the last decade, everything was very stable.
Yes.
So like technology was stable, no breakthrough innovation or invention.
Yeah.
Markets were stable.
Yeah.
Like categories were stable. Obviously, it's like little bits and pieces within categories, but for the most part, like
Yeah, we were working on dark mode for a reason. Like
exactly. Like Google Docs is Google Docs. It got better and better and better, but it's all incrementally better.
Yeah.
Gmail, like all these products that we use every day, messaging apps.
Yeah.
And now we have like Slack brought in like, custom emojis. That's
Yeah.
cool, but it's still emojis and it's still Slack.
Yeah,
It's still in the box,
exactly.
So like lots and lots of really good, solid stuff. But at no point really, at least certainly in Intercom, at no point do you look at ideas we have, roadmap projects and so on and say, is that even possible? You assume you can build everything. You assume it's actually quite straightforward to build. And in many cases, it's just about getting it done like well, fast, efficiently, kind of get out of your own way at times. So the market was stable, the technology was stable, and most people working in Intercom, that's their whole career. They've never seen the beginning of an S-curve before. And so right now I'm in the middle of trying to explain to people that things are going to change quite a lot in the next few years. Like you said, this new technology, AI, is unpredictable. It's a black box at times. Even to the people who work most deeply in it, not quite sure exactly how it works. And the more we push the frontiers of it, we still, it did a thing, that's surprising. Why did it do that? How do you think work will need to change? Like if we're product and engineering team building software, next year is 2025, like we're in the middle of changing it. Or what's the kind of shape of the changes, do you think?
I think I'll answer that in two different ways. The first one is like for most product categories, you're either like deeply affected by AI, like say customer services, or you're perhaps maybe a little bit more passively affected. Like AI can do a little bit here and there, but it's not ultimately like the core of your product might still end up being the same thing. I'm just riffing here because I can't imagine great ones, but let's just say like video editing software for like movies might be like AI augmented, but it doesn't you're not about to like reinvent or reimagine the whole concept or category, right? Whereas genuinely customer service looks irreparably different in a post-AI world. It's not close. And one thing that means is like, if you think of any successful tech startup, there's a gang of founders and maybe like the first 10 hires or so, and they huddle together and they build the thing. And lo and behold, the thing works, and you can charge cards, or you can like design graphics or manage projects or whatever the thing is. But that period where you're exploring the solution space and being like, all right, we think there's a new product to be created here. It's like a real-time workplace messaging thing. People want to share files, and maybe there's channels and there's private messaging. But you're kind of exploring a solution space to try and work out like what's the right shape of a product. But you do that once. Most of your company, the other 90% of the staff, if you're successful, show up after that was done. And they're mostly like working in the sort of boundary walls that you've defined for your product. And they agree with your sort of primary axioms of your product, like which is like, hey, real-time communication, emojis, files, whatever the hell, right? But like you're not constantly reimagining that. You're kind of executing that vision, if you like, right? I think for most categories that are substantially affected by AI, they have to now go and rediscover the shape of what the product will look like in an AI native world. And that means asking yourself like deep and dark questions about like everything we've been building for the last decade, is this still any use? Our fundamental principles that served us well to get us to like whatever it would be, like billions in valuation or hundreds of millions of revenue or tens of millions of revenue, wherever you are they still true? And it's quite possible in a lot of times they're not. Like, you might say like, oh, well, our app is a thing where Johnny logs in and he files his expenses by uploading receipts. And you're like, In a different world, that would work totally, in an AI first world, maybe none of those things happen. Maybe they don't even log into your product. Maybe the whole thing is a background service that connects to your photo app or something like, like you have to like be willing to really go back to the very core and ask yourself these questions. Now, the challenge is, for most companies, the vast majority of the people there have never done this before. So you're kind of like refounding the product in a sense.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do for starters. But then separately, it also means you're just in massive uncertainty. And you have to do it in conjunction, you can't just go off on like, because of all the unpredictability and volatility that you just enumerated, you can't go off into the forest and do this because everything is still changing. Like, it's not like we're not done with AI. Like, GPT 4.0 is not the last of the GPT 4.0s, there's more shit's going to change, more consumers will adopt more things, more of your competitors will emerge. So nothing is sort of sacred, nothing is stable. So this isn't a thing where you can have like a 2-day offsite in some fancy hotel and come back with the answer. This is a thing where you're going to forge your way to a new round of product market fit with a new set of AI-enabled customers, if you like. And you're going to do that in close partnership with them, building for them, listening, like taking the sort of bits of feedback you can and trying to form a new vision for your entire product and company. And that's like one whole thing that has to happen, if you like, right? And then, and that's like the sort of deep soulful thing. Now, I know, because as I said earlier, like, and we agreed, like, inertia is just so strong, that it's gonna be really hard to get people to do that. The world would just be a lot easier if you didn't have to.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot easier for Facebook to have stayed a web app,
Yeah.
But like that's not an option on the table unless you're willing to like die in 2 or 3 years. So you have to really go back to the basics and refound your product towards a new type of product market fit. And it might look substantially different. Like, if you imagine, say, some of our customers get 80-90% resolution rate with Fin. What does support look like when only 10% of the tickets are handled by humans? The default experience is not a human one.
Yeah.
So when we talk about human help desks and tagging and triage and routing, yeah, those things might still matter because it's 10% or whatever, or like even in a bad case, it's all 40%, but it's not the default. The default is just totally different. So when you think about that, you realize everything's kind of up for grabs again. Like everything, your reporting screen. You're previously in the old world, your reporting screen is, are my team doing their job?
Yeah.
That's actually not your biggest concern right now. Your biggest concern is Fin doing its job, So that is like, just, you have to really do a deep and thorough analysis of all that. And then the second, probably more tactical thing of like ways of working is, most of the future products are going to be a blend of probabilistic systems and deterministic systems. And you need to get good at designing both of those types of things, which means like things like rigid workflows with predictable, guaranteed sort of steps, and it will still probably be important depending on the domain. And then also to actually tap into all this AI magic, you need to be able to design around probabilism as well, or, the idea that something may or may not happen.
Yeah.
And the hardest part is then working out how the two of them interact.
Yeah.
And Benedict Evans had a nice sort of phrase or quote around this, which was basically, he said, most of software these days is trying to work out, do we want a probabilistic system calling a deterministic one, or the deterministic one calling a probabilistic one? So I'll put it another way, do you want if this then that, where the this and that are like are probabilistic, but the ifs are hard?
Yeah.
Or do you want the probabilistic system to be like, depending on what this looks like, do any of the following rigid steps, And in practice, most products in the future will be probably a hybrid of both of those, until we get to like, say, something that's way closer to 0% hallucination and like pretty cast iron performance from the actual LLMs themselves. So I think like that's probably the single biggest change you have to be willing to make, is like to work out, where is determinism necessary in your system, and how do you build tools so that people can guarantee outcomes? Where do they need to be certain that something happens? And you can imagine like a mortgage application or a medical application, they need to be like, never do the following or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then where is the biggest ROI for probabilism? Like, where is the biggest ROI for saying, hey, I think the AI will get this right 80% of the time, and that's going to be really valuable. So that's the hardest changes to make. But I'm curious, what's your take on all that?
Yeah. There's a few things in there. One is kind of more like a side point, but I think it's important. no matter how good these models get, like let's say we get to some version of AGI or some statement can be made that says like, this model is like equivalent to a human, human intelligence. Humans do dumb shit and make mistakes all the time. So like even in our world of customer service, the best human reps, the best person on the team, been here years, knows everything, loves their job, up to date on all the kind of latest, still make mistakes, still don't properly follow the guidance, misunderstand the thing. So
like the policy changes or their product changes and they give the wrong answer.
Exactly. So I think in this new world, no matter what, the probabilistic part is still going to be unpredictable, even when someone is like really, really, the model is really, really good. And then the other thing that struck me was, so you're always going to be designing around that. And then the other thing that struck me was, there's a new language here, I think. And I don't think people really, maybe some people certainly don't think about that enough. Again, you're stuck in your old ways of like, mock-ups or roadmaps or backlogs.
Even like flowcharts are wrong these days. Like the old like states and arrows and like if it's here, go there. How do you represent it might go any of these directions? We've no clue. It might even invent a new direction and that might be the right thing. It's like there's no visual language for that.
Yeah. So I think there is a new language, and like words like probabilistic or deterministic, I think are things they're kind of certainly in our world, when we're talking to customer service people are like, whoa, hold up, what does that actually mean in practice? So I think there's a new language forming. It does make me think a lot about, it's just my headspace these days maybe, but it does make me think a lot about the kind of roles people will have, the things that companies will have to do. So I'll come back to the roles thing in a second, but the things companies will have to do, we've recently launched a new product called Fin for Zendesk or Fin for Salesforce. It's Fin for another help desk. So Fin, our AI agent, now works on our competitor's platform. We announced it a few weeks ago.
So that means if you're a Zendesk customer, you can connect to Fin and Fin will go and do all your customer support for you inside Zendesk.
Exactly. And the idea is like, I use Zendesk, it's a pain in the ass to switch to Intercom, but our AI agent we believe is much better. Therefore you can use the best AI agent without the pain of switching. But we still are putting out our new best product available on our main competitor's platform. Not a decision we've done or taken for 13 years, and now we did it. And so like walk me through that a bit, because earlier you mentioned like companies are going to have to do things that they never would have normally done before. Like why are we doing that? To some people externally responded by saying like, that's the best thing, you're getting it. Or some people said, why?
Extreme confusion, this is weird, I mean, I think like a lot of this comes back to Clay Christensen's theory of disruptive innovation. This wasn't how we made the decision, to be clear, but like when you think about like what the decision means in a greater context, what it means is like, what does your world look like when there's a new product that does the majority of your customers' desires, and it doesn't have any of your incumbent features or functionality? That is kind of classic disruption theory. You could follow it out and maybe say like it's worse in many different ways. Oh, you can't get all these reports and it doesn't have this and it doesn't connect to that or whatever. But it's better in a very important way, which is that it resolves 80% of your conversations without needing any humans. So like clearly like Fin, the AI agent for customer service, is like a very disruptive property for help desks in general. Now, what's our options here? We could either say Fin is only available on the Intercom platform, and we would do that if we believed that the real end goal was to get everyone over to the Intercom platform. But actually, we have to be open-minded to the idea that the platform isn't as big a deal as it once was, and that actually the AI agent is the thing, and therefore you have to have the best agent, and one way to be the best agent is to like be available for everyone purchase, and like that's he'll tweak it and tune it. So a simple sort of reductive way of saying it is, if it's possible to build an agent that does support on all these help desks, and you build the best one, you're going to win the market. And we believe obviously Fin's been like battle tested for like whatever 16 months or something at this stage. We believe it's a very, very, very strong player in the market, and part of the logic of opening up was like literally the amount of people who used either say Service Cloud by Salesforce or Zendesk, and we're saying basically, hey, I'd love to use Fin, but like we're in a 3-year contract and we don't want to switch and we don't want to retrain our staff. All of those reasons are like how do you say, they're headwinds for Finn's potential, like, you know, explosive growth. And on the flip side, the only reason we'd like lock Finn up and keep it in this cage called the Intercom platform would be if we actually thought the platform was the main thing. But I don't think anyone has that degree of certainty about how the future shape of a full support solution, what it looks like, and how important is the platform. Will the platform be like relegated to being just a sort of a piece of the stack as opposed to being the main thing? If so, things like we have a beautiful UI and a beautiful inbox, all that doesn't really matter relative to like we've got the best agent. So I think the biggest decision is like in the new world of CS, what is the most important thing? Given that technology exists to do the majority of your support, the most important thing will probably be like who can do the most support and who can do it with the highest quality, as in the best answers, the highest CSAT, however you might measure best in terms of answer quality. And if that's going to be the single biggest driving decision and not the platform, why would you anchor all your thinking in like get them over to the platform?
Yeah.
Right. Now, it might be the case that platform still plays a substantial role. It might. But even if that was true, you'd still want to get these customers on board by any means possible. And that might mean starting off with Finn anyway. So I think like the way I'd frame this to be like, would you say repurposable logic for the listeners would be, you have to really be willing to be open-minded and potentially like self-harming in a way, like to actually make all the right decisions here. Because the new, like, let's just say the new YC startups that are being born at the moment, they don't have any of your burden or legacy or like, you know, troublesome thoughts or any of that sort of stuff. They don't have to worry about any of that. So they're just going to do the right thing because there's nothing anchoring them in. If you read all the classic stories of disruption, like the one that comes to mind a lot is like, say, like Blockbuster versus, say, Netflix, right?
Yeah.
They had the option to buy them, I think, didn't work out, or they chose not to. They kind of laughed at it, like, who's going to watch videos over the internet type thing, right? And I think when you read a lot of the narrative, what they convince themselves that like we have a store in every city in America. Like that sounds useful. Like we've got bricks and mortar stores, we've got this connection. Actually, it didn't matter in the era of the internet. It's actually irrelevant. But I'm sure you could have convinced yourself that that would be really a useful thing to have, right? And similarly, I worry there's like products or companies out there that are convincing themselves that these new AI startups, well, they don't have all of the X, Y, Z, which might be anything from like project management system collaboration file, whatever the hell it might be. But maybe none of those things actually matter. Or maybe they matter a really small amount. They used to be the majority of the product, but now they're the minority. So being best at the minority and like not so great at the majority in the new world is not a way to win. So you have to really interrogate deeply, like, what does the new shape of a product look like in this sort of AI first world? And you have to be willing to transmorph your investment and ultimately your product to be there. You want to be best at the things that matter most, which will probably in the future look like automating away a lot of like human work. And then you don't need to keep investing in things that just don't matter that much, which in this case might be a lot of the previous like human stuff, like which, classic SaaS, create, retrieve, update, delete, all that type of like pointy, clicky, mousey type stuff that probably just doesn't matter as much anymore. So like that's the thinking that led to us making that decision. That's kind of how I'd advise anyone else to try and walk through that decision. Yeah. If you come to the conclusion that you don't need to change that much, you're either a very specific edge case, or you're heavily anchored by either your current revenue book, your current customers, your current team, your current tech stack, but something's holding you back, I would posit.
Yeah. I'll just pick up a few things there. One is like hard things are hard. That's just it. Hard things are hard. Other things there, one is, you were saying, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you,
Yeah.
But it's kind of classic with me. Like a reason for us to not have launched Finn standalone is maybe we'll lose loads of our future revenue we would have got otherwise. Like all these companies are going, hey, we're thinking of switching from Zendesk. We're weighing the pros and cons. Finn looks awesome. And some are like, we're going to switch. Eat the pain.
Yeah.
Or no, we're not sure, Now these people can say, oh, well, hang on a sec, Finn standalone, I'll just buy that. And Finn standalone, you only pay if it works, and if it resolves a query. So literally we're getting $0 at the start from people picking it up. and versus
we're
like,
losing all the seat.
and we're losing all the seat revenue that we would have otherwise.
Yeah.
So like that's a big, bold, brave thing to do. And so that's one thing I think people have to internalize, especially if they're working at a smaller company or indeed a larger company and have a say in these things is like you have to be willing to make bets like that.
Yeah, and can I just say one thing? That's a great example, but the flaw in the thinking there, I think, or at least time will tell, is that you're using the lens of the past to analyze the future, which is totally ignoring the sort of whatever the shock factor of AI here, right?
Yeah,
you're saying you're imagining all that AI, all that seat revenue still exists in 5 years' time.
Yeah,
it might not.
Yeah,
and therefore you're going to cripple the growth of the AI revenue to preserve the seat revenue, even though in your future world you believe that the seat revenue is shrinking away and the AI revenue is the only revenue that matters. But like that's exactly the analysis you'll do when you look at the new business through the lens of the old business.
Yeah, and people will think about finance and revenue and numbers by in terms of quarters and years.
Yeah,
like this month's pipe to generate this quarter's revenue to get the, whatever. So
another you have to remember where you were going to go with this. But one thing I'll just say is another example of that is like the shift in pricing in the AI world is all around outcome-based pricing or consumption-based pricing or usage-based pricing, specifically not seat revenue, because obviously seats don't really make much sense when it's agents. A lot of discussion I've seen from like pricing pros have been like, well, you have to bear in mind the problem with consumption revenue is it's not really as recurring as previous, and it's lumpy and it's unpredictable, and NRR doesn't make as much sense, and churn is weird and all that. You're like, yeah. We don't have a choice.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like, I don't know what world they're imagining they could get us back to, like, but it's like, yes, I agree. It's quite inconvenient that the entire world has changed. However, not changing with it is not an option,
Yeah, absolutely. Here's something I was going to go back to. Again, like I'm kind of recalling the beginning of the mobile S-curve because I'm living something for the second time, maybe for the third time. Like you and I both kind of started our careers when the web was only still kind of emerging and things.
Web 2 and all that.
Web 2 were things possible, all sorts of stuff like that. But when you were talking there, you talked about like Netflix and will people watch movies online?
Yeah.
I remember. So again, I was lucky in the places I worked. I learned a lot there at the time I was there. So I was working on the first mobile version of YouTube, and there was huge skepticism in YouTube as well as Google generally. Huge skepticism that anyone would watch a video on your phone.
Yeah.
Why would you watch a video on your phone? It's this size. No, like really low resolution, like frame rates shit, like everything's worse. Like literally every single dimension of a video is worse.
Yeah.
And the only advantage is like it's small and a bit fuzzy and you can watch it, I guess. You can watch it wherever you are.
Yeah.
And like so many people said no one will watch videos on their phones.
Yeah, it's a smaller, shitter experience and it only has one little convenience, which is that it's in your pocket.
And this was, by the way, like the default thinking of so many people at the time, inside YouTube too. Yeah. So many people, like the default thinking was people won't do it.
Yeah.
And like I want to transpose that to today because I put a post on LinkedIn that was probably a bit too like pointy and said some version like if you don't have half your product engineering team working on the AI version of your product that'll disrupt yourself, you need to.
Yeah.
And loads of people were weighing in saying like...
You went hard in the paint on that one.
I did. I overacted a bit. But if you want to like LinkedIn, you got to do that. There's only one way to win this game. And so, but a lot of people were like, hey, you're like, my industry won't be disrupted. Like AI, of course, customer service will.
Yeah, I can see where that matters.
Mine won't.
Yeah.
And I remember and like, oh yeah, and people won't watch videos on mobiles.
Yeah.
Other stuff like, I mentioned again, like in Google when the iPhone came out, fascinating. People were like, no one will do work on that.
Yeah.
Look at my BlackBerry. Like, we all have BlackBerries because BlackBerries are cool. BlackBerries are the number one phone, the best phone in the world. Kim Kardashian's a spokesperson. Everyone's cool has a BlackBerry. We all have BlackBerries. They had like loads of buttons, really powerful, hardcore. You can write emails on this BlackBerry. Then this iPhone comes out and it's like it's got one button, and that button does one thing. Take you back to the home screen. And like cold hard glass, tapping on letters on cold hard glass. Again, people working in like just in the Google example, Gmail or like the Docs product, or like it's like no one's doing that. No one's gonna do that.
Yeah.
And again, wrong.
Yes.
Arguably, me and you might do as much work on our phones as we do on our laptops half the time. And so this is like hard burned into my brain.
Yeah.
How wrong I was,
Yeah.
or how wrong our colleagues were.
It's a classic, like, it's like a conjugation type thing where it's like, sustaining innovation for me, disruptive innovation for thee. You know, it's like, this thing doesn't affect me that much. I can see how it affects other people.
Yeah.
I think we all run around saying that, like, you know, and I think that's literally like the thinking that, like, you know, kind of walks you off a cliff or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
I've started using Notebook LM a lot.
Yeah.
And I think this product is like the canary in the coal mine or whatever. I think if you don't use Notebook LM, you should start using it, and you're listening, and you should start I started using it. Most people were like, hey, it's a good way to, like, you know, put in something, get a summary or whatever. And now I'm using it for all sorts of things. I don't even know what it is. Is it a notebook? I guess it's a notebook.
Yeah.
But like, I don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
And here's like an example of things I'm doing. You know, we have a research and data science team RAD, great name. And RAD do studies all the time. Really good research, really good data science studies, analysis, product and analysis and everything. I'm just adding all the studies into Notebook. Like next deck, next Google Slides, Google Doc thing, interview notes, put that, and like, and so I'm just like throwing it all in, and then I can query it.
Yeah, or listen to a podcast.
Or listen to a podcast about it. Yeah, and like it's like a new thing I never had before. And I don't even know how to describe it.
And I'm sure genuinely, like, not to pick on like any vendor friends, but like, I'm sure if you're deep into bells at Tableau, you're like, no one's ever going to listen to a podcast about their research. They're going to want to look at our pie charts.
Right.
Wrong.
Until they're on a train.
Yeah.
You know, like
or
they're
walking
underground and it's like busy and they like can't take out their Tableau dashboard.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, it's awkward. I don't want to talk to it.
Yeah.
So I'll just listen. You know. So there's just all sorts of new types of categories.
Yeah.
Use cases, products that you can't put in a bucket. I think we're like at the 2 years in. I think we're at the turning point.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say on all this, I think we're ready to wrap, is I think 2025 is going to be a mixed year. I think you're going to see a lot of the toy products I referenced at the start. I think you'll see them like die or get acqui-hired or fade away. I think things like novelty use cases, were like, well, isn't it cool that you can create a song based on a blah? I think experimental budgets, all that. A lot of stuff kind of like gave a lot of these AI apps a kind of explosive leg up. You know, they went from like 0 to 5, 0 to 10 million. They all kind of, I believe, and I know in some cases, like, are hitting different types of walls. And I think the quip, I can't remember who it was, that said it, possibly Dharmesh or someone, who was like, you know, the seminal paper in this space was called "Attention is all you need," but like, actually the business argument here is that retention is actually all you need. And a lot of these people are going to struggle with retention for that exact, you know, for the exact reason that, like, a lot of the initial sort of, you know, how to say, growth that they saw was fueled not by like deeply solving a customer need, but actually just by people pricking around, you know. And that just doesn't last forever. So I think you might see a lot of like histrionics in the media about the death of all these AI companies, and maybe the whole AI thing was a mirage. And we're coming to that point in the hype cycle where people are really starting to attack it anyway. I think all that is basically true. We're going to see a lot of dead AI startups, and by dead, it'll look like acquired for like unreported amounts and all that sort of shit. But I also think you're going to see 2025 will also be the acceleration of like proper enterprise adoption of AI in all corners of the business. Obviously, for us, this is a massive concern with customer service. We want to make sure we're out there. Part of what Finn on Zendesk, Finn on Service Cloud is about. But I think you're going to see it in like everywhere, from like engineering to like project management to marketing to copywriting to like finance, you name it. People will start realizing there's like massive ROI to deploying these tools. So I think it'll be a mixed year in that there's going to be a lot of like, honestly, sadly, but like, you know, it's part of the creative destruction of like, you know, tech or whatever. A lot of startups that were born 2 years ago will die. 90% of most startups die. This isn't news. It just happens they're all carrying a badge now, which is AI. So a lot of AI startups will die. But you're also going to see, I think, a lot of explosive growth everywhere else. And it's going to be like it'll be a fun year from that regard.
It will, yeah. I think it's really important for people to think about the S curve and and study history. Like this pattern repeats over and over. It's the same every single time.
Yeah.
I know you shared this phenomenal photograph of Wall Street and I think of the 1920s to 1930, kind of an 8 or 9, 10 year gap. First photo has just horses on it. The second photo has mostly cars. And there's a middle part there where like there's horses and cars and all mixed together and it's all chaos. And I remember, you know, when you read about these things, there was like the anti-car movement, the pro-horse movement. There's like, these things are smelly and dirty and horrible, and like horses can like ride over mountains. Can that car go over that mountain? No, it can't. You know, horses are way better than cars. Horses are way better than cars. I think we're in that, that's where we are now. People going, horses are better than cars. And, you know, we're about to see like suburbia be created, you know, second and third order effects
of AI.
And so, like you said, it'll be a mixed bag, I think, but we're starting to, like Notebook LM, great example. We're starting to, and we'll see, I think, excellent products that are a different shape to anything we've seen before.
Absolutely. Long may continue.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should leave it there, I think. Des, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks to our listeners, and we'll see you next time.